So I want to phrase we've been throwing around a lot here is social democracy, which is probably worth clarifying because as Sean was kind of mentioning, in this historical period doesn't mean the same thing that it means now, right? So the all socialists, right? You know, could use socialism and social democracy.
Yeah, even the anarchists, by the way, of the Haymarket era.
Yeah, right. I mean, and whatever. Lenin called himself a social democrat, right? Until World War One. And social democracy, in that original sense, right, that was used as a synonym for socialism, is meant very literally, right? Like this is what Sean was talking about. We want to extend democracy into the social realm. Yeah, you wanted to pick up on that, Daniel?
And this is the big issue, right? Because what happens over the course of 1890 to 1940 is that there's several crises of Marxism. Right, so Marx is basically like once the working class is empowered, there's kind of a functional relationship to actually existing socialism. But by the late 19th century, this doesn't happen, right? Just it historically, empirically doesn't happen, right? So this presents the first of, I think, a very important crisis for Marxism writ large internationally, and this leads to the first sort of major revolution in what would come to later be called Western Marxist thought, as diverse from sort of Soviet communism. But this divide doesn't actually exist yet, just like there's no divide between social democracy and communism until basically the splitting of the German socialists in World War I. So there's a big debate in German Marxism in roughly the late 19th and early 20th century about the question of reform versus revolution. Mm-hmm. And you have people like Karl Kautsky and especially Eduard Bernstein, who is internationally influential, essentially saying that the key to socialist transformation is through expansion of the vote and expansion through participation in the emergent democratic processes of these European states and the United States. So of course you have to remember, let's just take the United States. Women don't have the vote until the 20s, right? So there's like massive numbers of people who aren't enfranchised throughout Europe and throughout the United States. So then what becomes sort of the leadership of the German socialist movement, and I think it's important to emphasize that this socialism is not necessarily just a party, but a movement. And what I mean by that is that the party is just one part of a larger movement, which includes cultural organizations, which includes things like bowling leagues, which includes things like Boy Scouts, which includes things like dance halls and bars, right? You'd go to the socialist bar, you wouldn't go to the, nationalist bar, the imperialist bar, whatever it may be. So the idea, though, is that the goal of socialism is supposed to be, at least through the people who run the movement in the North Atlantic core, is sort of participation in the democratic process. And then there are people who very much disagree with this. Many famous socialist thinkers, Luxemburg, Lenin, of course, disagree with this, what they view as sort of this ameliorative program. But this is, I think, what becomes the center of what might be called organized socialism. So I just wanted to emphasize that point.
Yeah, and I do want to point out, by the way, just to defend the honor of my boy Karl Kautsky, so this split we're talking about here, which mirrors itself in the American context, right? But is most explicitly happening probably in German social democracy.
Which is the heart of the socialist movement. I think it's important to emphasize that until the Soviet Union, international socialists looked to Germany. That is the sort of framework through which people like Debs all over the world, Lenin, they're looking to Germany because Marx says it's the heart of the Industrial Revolution in continental Europe, and also Marx was German. So I think that's also important to emphasize.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
I will dissent.
Sorry, Harvey, go for it.
I don't think Debs quite bows to German social democracy. I mean, the thing about Debs is he remains very, very firmly a part of, in his mind, this kind of, he's a socialist, but he really is a part of this American socialist tradition that's emerging. And I'm not disagreeing. I would just dissent on the degree to which Debs does that. Okay?
Well, I take your point, just very quickly, Ben. I take your point. Debs, you're the specialist. But I would say, like, as Daniel Rogers shows in Atlantic Crossings, Germany is this space where Americans and other people really look to. The degree to Debs, I totally defer. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, I mean, my sense is that both are true, right? I mean, like that this stuff has roots in a distinctively American radical tradition, but is also deeply engaged with what's going on in these debates in Germany, and is very influenced by people like Kautsky. What I was going to say there is, in terms of this division between, like Harvey mentioned a couple times, the sewer socialists in Milwaukee, which in a lot of ways anticipate what we now call social democracy, which would be, like I used the phrase earlier, socialism within capitalism. That, like, as opposed to socialism as a system coming after capitalism, and that's complicated, right? As Harvey mentions, right? These guys also were all about public ownership, but in that debate playing out in Germany between Bernstein, who is really advocating this view that this sort of gradual process of reforms is actually more important than this kind of end state goal of abolishing the division of society between workers and capitalists and extending democracy to the workplace, and that, or at the very least, that can be achieved through this very gradual process, in a way that really de-emphasizes traditional Marxist ideas about class struggle. In that debate, Kautsky is on the side of fairly orthodox Marxism. That if you read his book, The Road to Power, he's defending Marx and Engels' ideas about class struggle and the importance of a rupture with capitalism. He doesn't have the same position as somebody like Rosa Luxemburg. There is a real difference there, right? But it's a three-way debate rather than a two-way debate, which
yeah, and Ben. Ben is, you're exactly right. I think what's important to emphasize here is a lot of this has to do with fairly parochial debates about what type of party you're going to have. Is it going to be a Klassenpartei or a Volkspartei? Right. And so, like, this is the question, right? Are you going to try to have cross-class alliance within a socialist party, or are you not going to have cross-class alliance? And Bernstein is very much on the side of a cross-class alliance in a way that Kautsky is not. I think that's another important thing to underline. Yeah,
and his and so Kautsky is emphasizing parliamentarism, but in
exactly
in a way that's still very tied to class politics and the necessity of this kind of rupture from capitalism, which in a lot of ways, right? I mean, just to put my own cards on the table, I think is kind of the exactly right bowl of porridge there, that is as far.
Yeah, and I just want to throw
as far as how to think about this. But Harvey, go for it.
The American context. This is not American exceptionalism. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But there is something actually rather exceptional in these circumstances in a very material way, and that is that the German peasant class, okay, which was more of a farming class in the West and more of a truly peasant class in the East, those kind of folks are from the course of the 1850s and 60s, they're driven out in great numbers. And where do they come? They're here. Okay, I'm in the German American state, settled by all those people who wanted land. And here's Debs. Now Burgis he's urban, but Debs is very much attached to populism, very much attached to the Southwestern socialists who combine sort of an agrarian and a industrial kind of socialism. And then to throw into the mix, because I'm in the state which gave birth in some ways to the capital P progressivism, you've got progressive politicians who are actually the ones really pushing a kind of middle class, sorry, for lack of a better term, a kind of middle class democratic politics. And one of the things that the sewer socialists figured out is they could actually cooperate with the progressives. Okay, so it sort of complicates the entire socialist experience. I'm speaking from the Midwest, okay? And so, but actually out there in the Northwest, the progressives and the socialists had to cut their own deals, I expect, so.
Yeah.
Just very briefly, and of course, there's, as Harvey knows better than I, There's right-wing progressives, there's left-wing progressives. The progressives have different relationships to different immigrant classes. So I just want to emphasize, like he said, it's just a very locally contextualized thing in a lot of ways.
I don't know if can you help me out? I don't think there's a counterpart to that on the continent, the progressives.
No, they're liberals. They're sort of liberal technocrats would be the closest thing you get. Because the progressives are so shaped by immigration, I think, in the response to immigration in a way that just doesn't happen in Europe.
Right.